This week I've been daily driving what Aston Martin calls their first super tourer, the 2024 DB12. This is one of those weeks where I have had to pinch myself a few times. I think 15-year-old me would freak out if he could see into the future and see that he got to live with an Aston Martin for 4 days. But anyways, I thought today we would show you what it's like to daily drive this so-called super tourer. We'll take it for a little loop around the performance area out here. We'll jump on the highway and we'll commute it to downtown, because at the end of the day, a grand tourer, super tourer, whatever you want to call it, should be comfortable, should be daily drivable. So we're going to take a deep dive here into this very green and extremely gorgeous Aston Martin DB12. I have been walking around this thing and just staring at it more than I would like to admit this week. I think it's probably the most gorgeous car that we have driven so far this year. Iridescent emerald is what they call the color. It's a $12,000 option, and it brings this thing up to a total MSRP of $315,000, which means this has 70 grand in options. The DB12 starts at 245 grand. Now, this is a totally new model for Aston Martin for the 24 model year. It replaces the DB11, which was kind of based off of that DB10 Skyfall James Bond car. So, I mean, this thing seriously looks the part, but it's a little bit of a departure from past Aston Martin models. This no longer has a V12. It's been a while since one of the DB David Brown series vehicles hasn't had a V12, and while Aston Martin in the last few years has adopted this 4-liter twin-turbo V8 from Mercedes-AMG. In the DB12, it makes 671 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque, so it's no slouch. Just because we lost the V12 doesn't mean that this thing is slow. In fact, when I floored it for the first time, it took my breath away. I mean, this thing is seriously quick, but yes, we still have the power, but we're, I think, kind of missing the soul of that V12 still when I look at this car, and especially when you look at this behemoth of a front end. It's so long up here. You definitely expect to see a V12 under the hood. While we're on the topic of that, let's pop the hood. Let's show you this 4-liter twin-turbo AMG V8, and I am going to the wrong side. Aston Martin's hood pop is on the passenger side because it's British. A lot of these are built in right-hand drive, and they just don't move the hood pop. So there it is. We'll pop that open, and we'll show you the beating heart of the DB12. And there it is. You can see it's set pretty far back, and even though this is a Mercedes engine, final assembly of the car still happens in Great Britain. This is still a hand-built vehicle, and final inspection was done by Mr. Kieran Coffey. So thank you so much for that, and everything looks fantastic. It's interesting to see this because there's so much room in front of the engine all the way to the actual front of the car. It's taken up by cooling fans and accessories and whatever else, but this is definitely a mid-front engine setup, and with this being the M177 4-liter twin-turbo V8, we have that hot V setup. You can see those twin turbos there right on top of the engine. Tons of chassis bracing and really just an impressive looking engine bay. It fits the pretty nature of the rest of the car, that is for sure. Lots of different induction areas for airflow throughout this bonnet, as the British would call it. We'll shut that and we will just kind of admire this thing for another second. I mean, God, the lines of this car, the way that the back is wider than the front. I love the hips. I love the roofline. I love the taillights. These are actually an optional tinted taillight design. They are clear, of course, until you step on the brakes. But even though this car is an entirely new model, it is still unapologetically Aston Martin. I mean, you can look at this thing going down the road, and I at least immediately know what it is. The grille is kind of the most telltale sign that this is a new model. It's a lot larger than the outgoing DB11, but otherwise it doesn't really look all that different. I think that's okay. We have these 21-inch bronze wheels, a 275/35 R21 on the front, and a 325/30 R21 on the back. These are a bit of an interesting tire. They are a Pilot Sport S5 AML, which tells me that these are tailor-made for the DB12. AML meaning, in my mind, Aston Martin Lagonda. Oh, my goodness. Do you guys actually want to drive this, or can we just like stare at it for the entire time? Because that's kind of just what I want to do. But let's waste no time. Let's show you some commute essentials. Maybe you're taking some stuff with you. We'll pop the boot here, which actually, before I show you trunk size, I want to show you this clever aero system. You can see behind our quarter glass here, we have this aerodynamic little tunnel that enters right here. You should be able to see, if I'm positioning the camera right, you should be able to see daylight through there. And the same through here. And you may be thinking, oh, well, that just dumps into the trunk, doesn't it? No, because there is a little exit right here with this pop-up aero spoiler where the air can escape. So we have some cool aero stuff, some trickery on this DB12, but getting to the trunk space, it's a bit small. I think you could fit a couple of day bags in here. This is obviously adequate for going grocery shopping or doing any sort of daily tasks. You'd have no issue with this amount of space. We have another little cubby right there. I don't really know what you'd put in there. And I've also just noticed somebody's taken our umbrella. There should be an umbrella here mounted at the back. And then I'll open it just for comedic purposes. You open that and a tire inflator kit comes flying out, and then it's very hard to do back up again. Actually, I got it the first time that time, proud of myself. So not a ton of room back here in the trunk area. And it's funny because the way that this car is designed, the trunk almost hangs off the back of the car. I mean, it is the absolute back of the vehicle. There's really not too much room between the trunk and the rear bumper. And there's no little loop to grab and pull the trunk shut, so you do find yourself touching the paint. As much as I'd like to sit around and stare at this thing all day, let's take it out on the road and see what it's like to drive. Inside the cabin, we have this mostly black quilted leather interior. Somewhat signature Aston Martin, though I do kind of prefer the honeycomb design. I don't know if you can still get that on the DB12, but nevertheless, this diamond stitch does look nice. We have a little bit of tan under these holes in the seat, and it's strange because the actual build sheet shows a bit more tan on the side bolsters and some other aspects of this seat. We do have quite a bit of tan on our door panels, but it's a little bit strange that that's kind of the only tan we have in here. I wonder if maybe somebody put the wrong seats in this car, or if this is just a pre-production vehicle, or I don't know what happened with it, but that's just the truth. Forgot to show you guys the swan doors. That's what Aston Martin calls their doors that open traditionally but up slightly, so you can see. Yeah, proper stuff. And I'll tell you what, as cool as it has been to live with this Aston Martin, it's also been cool to live with the vehicle hand-built, by a small British manufacturer. I have had some interesting little foibles this week, and we'll talk a bit about those once we jump on the road, but let's go ahead and fire this thing up and listen to this 4-liter V8 come to life. You can see there everything powers up quite quickly. This is an in-house Aston Martin infotainment screen. It's 10.25 inches to match our 10.25 digital gauge cluster. And honestly, I haven't had any problems with this infotainment screen this week. Even with its kind of oddly tilted forward angle, it's been totally fine. It did take a little bit of time to learn how to actually use it, and admittedly I had to go on YouTube and look up a tutorial on how to change the settings because I didn't realize that there was a hidden menu to the left here. I thought that this was kind of all I had here. But we have wireless Apple CarPlay. We have a $10,000 optional Bowers & Wilkins sound system. We'll do a demo of that once we jump onto the highway. We have some in-house navigation, and you know what? I'm going to say it. I'm proud of Aston Martin for creating a simple yet effective infotainment system here in the DB12. We have a ton of physical buttons here down on our center console area. All of it is trimmed in piano black, which means after 5 seconds of driving with the windows down or 10 seconds of living with the car normally, everything is covered in dust, and I literally just wiped this off before filming so you all could see it in its purest form, but it has been quite dusty for me this week. Everything seems to work fine except the lane keep assist. No matter what I do, it won't turn off. Even though it says it's off, as you can see, it isn't actually off. So I don't know if I'm doing something wrong here. I've tried holding the button, nothing works. The same with the auto stop start. You are able to get the light to change here for it to turn on or off, but that doesn't seem to change anything. So I don't really know how to work that either. Heated and cooled seats, which you can activate at the same time. Love seeing that bit of Mercedes influence. Speaking of Mercedes influence, also, I believe the steering wheel has been pulled from an AMG Mercedes. The airbag design is suspiciously similar. The actual design of the entire steering wheel, the flat bottom and everything, looks quite a bit like the GLA and CLA 35 vehicles I was driving earlier this month. Anyways, though, I think that pretty much takes care of it. Let's roll these windows up, and we'll kind of talk as we drive out to the test loop, and we'll show you what it's like to live with this Super Tourer. For shifters, we have kind of like a Porsche 911 Braun Shaver style thing. We no longer have that cool Touchtronic dashboard control that we had in older Aston Martins, including actually the current DBX. I was driving a 2015 Aston Martin Vanquish last week, and that was an excellent experience. And I'm glad I got to do that because it's kind of helped me in evaluating this DB12 this week. Even though this shifter is kind of basic, it does work well, and I have no complaints with functionality. Our start-stop button doubles as a drive mode selector. I'm going to bump us into my individual drive mode, mostly because it turns the cluster green, and I enjoy staring at that more than I enjoy staring at an orange cluster. Now, this car is quite wide. You were able to see that on the 16 walkarounds I did of the car. But maneuverability is still adequate. The steering is pretty light and precise, almost Mercedes-esque. I don't think Mercedes had anything to do with the steering feel or the tuning of this car in any way, but I do appreciate the luxurious feel at low speeds here in parking lots, because in my opinion, that's one of the most important things for a car that's marketed as ultra luxury, and this one certainly is. Geez, I gotta compliment their vent placement too, because a lot of the times infotainment kind of takes the upper hand to vent placement, so the priority just isn't there. But in the Aston Martin, the vents are placed above the infotainment screen, which means you can properly aim them at yourself. You can stay nice and cool in the DB12. My individual drive mode is tuned to every single thing in comfort. Auto stop start off, which doesn't change anything, and then exhaust set to its loudest setting. So I'm going to shut up here for the next minute or so. Just let you listen. Even power band in this car. We do have more horsepower than torque, but you still have plenty of get up in, I mean, no matter what RPM you're at. Physical button to put us into manual mode. Guys, this thing is alarmingly quick. It is absolutely wild. Maybe think that, the reason they call this a super tourer is because it is so quick, and I would mostly agree with you. But then you go and you take it around a corner and you think, how can this car also be so soft and reserved and go around a corner like that? I mean, I wasn't even pushing it as hard as I could push it around that corner there, and you guys saw the immense amount of grip that this car has. It is unbelievable, and I'm in comfort suspension. I think part of it is these Pallet Sport S5 AML tires on this thing. I don't know what is around the other side of that semi. Nothing. Okay. Ooh, there's a cool lifted cross trek with a roof rack. And some mud flaps. Cool. Okay, I'm going to take us out of manual mode because we have some important business to do. We are going to try a race start, which is a little bit pulled from Mercedes. It is kind of their launch control technology that we have here in this car. But let's go ahead and stick us into Sport Plus. That's going to be our most aggressive drive mode here. It's just a matter of essentially doing a brake stand. Left foot brake, right foot on accelerator, release brake. So let's go ahead and do that now. Race start active. Ooh, and heavy onto those brakes. Transmission tuning in Sport Plus is aggressive. The way in which this car moves, oh my goodness. Aston Martin claim a 3.7 second 0 to 60, but I think it's quicker than that. These 325 section rear tires are able to just launch this thing. I mean, you really don't struggle for traction in this car. All right, let's quit while we're ahead and let's jump on the highway and show you what it's like to live with this DB12. I'm just intoxicated by every aspect of this thing. Now, we'll talk about the V8 just a little bit before we get on the highway. As I mentioned earlier, I drove a Vanquish last week. My favorite part about that car was the V12, and I think if we had a bit of that soul sprinkled into this DB12, I would like it just that much better. I don't necessarily have a problem with this V8. I think what Aston Martin has tried to do is they've kind of tried to bring the elegance of the V12 into this twin-turbo V8, but I think maybe they just should have committed to the bit completely with the V8 and kind of made it a little bit raspier, given it a little bit of a deeper exhaust note, some pops and burbles on the down rev. Because we have, for, you know, as rowdy as this car is, it's a pretty mature exhaust note, a pretty mature sound. Which, I mean, I could see it going either way. You could argue that this is kind of the mature Aston, so it should be that way. And I can absolutely see that side of the argument. So, kind of just, you know, use your own judgment on that, your own opinion. What I like about this car is the ability to just get around anything and everything, because to some people that is an important part about daily driving, being able to just get out of the way, get to where you need to go. Power's good, maneuverability is good. But I miss the V12. I mean, who wouldn't miss a V12? The good news is you can still get the V12. You just have to opt for the DBS, which is one step up. Okay, we are going quicker than I realized. There is one thing I do want to disclose to you guys as we float down the highway here, and that is that the speedo in the DB12 is a bit optimistic. I found it reading anywhere from 3 to 5 miles per hour above how quickly you're actually going. So whatever speed you see on there, subtract some from it, because that is the truth in the situation here. Okay, let's do some touring here, shall we? Our seat adjustments are actually down here in a little bit of an awkward position. Based on how this center console is designed, I don't know that I would really call this very easy to access, because you kind of have to contort your arm. The ergonomics are definitely not the best in this car, so definitely set your seating position before you're on the road, as most people do, but sometimes I do like to adjust my lumbar while I'm on the move. The actual seating position in this car is nice. You can sit super low down. The hood expands into the horizon. It is super long in front of you. I'm being interrupted by the car letting me know that traffic sign assist is inoperative. This is one of 3 warnings that I have gotten this week in this car. So the car is prompting me to talk about it. Let's talk about it. I've gotten traffic sign assist inoperative. I've gotten automatic high beams inoperative, and I have gotten an error for our electronically locking rear differential. Also the car just hasn't started twice. So those have been a couple little foibles while living with this thing. I've had to like hold the key to the start stop button, open the door, shut it, kind of reset the car, and then it starts up. So it hasn't left me stranded per se, but I have had to kind of mess with it to get it to start. So I've gotten the full small British manufacturer experience this week, and honestly, I've loved every second of it. It's special when a car has some soul, when it kind of just acts like a human in that way. Nobody's perfect, the car's not perfect, so I have been able to appreciate it for that. Anyways though, sitting in the DB12 is a nice place to be. That's really what I've been trying to say here for the last couple of minutes. Elbow placement is pretty nice. You can see we've got a van there cutting across. Pure chaos on the drive. We have a really nice squishy surface here for our door panel elbow rest. You unfortunately aren't really able to set yourself up super well to drive this car in a relaxed position just because the armrest does sit quite far back in the cabin. This is also one of those cars that feels more like a cockpit than an open cabin. With this raised center console, you do feel set into this driver's compartment. You do still have a fair amount of legroom. I think you could be quite a bit larger than me and still fit into this car with no problem. For some context, I'm 5'11", about 150 pounds, and for me, I've got plenty of room. I think you, like I said, could be bigger and you'd have no problem in here. Headroom is also nice. You could probably be up to like 6'5", and you could drive this car with no problem just because the seat goes down quite a ways. Let's see kickdown for passing. Okay, and we've just, in the blink of an eye, caught the Ford Escape. For transmission, we have an 8-speed ZF 8HP, which is pretty much the 8-speed automatic that's in everything else on the market today. It's one of my favorite transmissions, and it's a pretty conservative tune on this car, meaning there's not really any drama. There's no farts between shifts, and it's not really snappy or anything like that. It's definitely tuned for smoothness, which fits the character of this car. But I'll tell you, when you put your foot down to make a pass, I mean, you're just gone. I mean, you basically teleport to the car in front of you. The mid-range torque in this thing is just unbelievable. Okay, let's drop the windows. Our exhaust is already in its sportiest setting. We'll bump this back into manual mode. See what kind of drama we have under these bridges. No drama test today, lots of traffic. Oh, actually, I take that back. We are going to be able to test it. Mostly just hearing the noise from the $14,000 optional carbon ceramic brakes on this car. They do make quite a bit of noise, but that's okay. Ceramic brakes usually like to sing the song of their people. And speaking of the brakes, man, these are some of the most impressive I've ever felt. When I started this job, I always used to hear the Topher and Charlie use the term wooden to describe brake pedals, and I never really quite understood what that meant until I started to drive some kind of higher end sports cars and Grand Tourers like this. But this may be the most wooden brake pedal I've ever felt. I mean, it is a consistent feel. You really got to press on it, and the actual feel of that is nice. I understand that may not be for everybody, but I do quite like the way that that feels. It is move-in weekend for the University of Michigan, which is just down the street. So traffic may be heavier than normal in today's video, but if anything, that just gives us a bit more of a real-world experience here with the DB12. I think while we're sitting in traffic, why don't we do a bit of a sound system test and let you experience, again, this $10,000 optional Bowers & Wilkins.
Told you to walk away. That was my first and last mistake. I blew without your face. But what can I do? 'Cause I'm just a sinking ship, and you're just a pair of lips that I've lost in the moment. All I want is for you to come back.
swing through Whole Foods real quick, just because I figure I'll show you guys maneuverability as we are doing a bit of a daily driving test with this DB12. Hope that was enough of a sound system demo for you. I think this is a pretty impressive system. Obviously, you know, sound systems don't sound the best in cars that simply don't have the architecture to support a super impressive sound system, but I think that this is just about as good as they can get. And having not heard the bass sound system, I can't really tell you if it's worth it for the 10 grand, but if you're already spending over $250,000, I mean, why not get the Bowers & Wilkins? Let's show you our parking cameras here. You guys can get a sense of maneuverability. You can see this reverse camera does make everything look quite fisheye. One thing I have found is that the 360 camera is a bit more effective in actually showing you where you're going, and it makes the DB12 look like a Monopoly piece, which I think is quite fun. So let's jump out. Normally I wouldn't leave an Aston Martin in between two cars like this, but I do want to show you guys kind of placement in a spot and show you what this thing looks like if you are to bring it somewhere. The swan doors are on a shock. You can open them pretty much all the way. I think the slightly upwards angle allows this car to be easier to get in and out of, you know. And there we are in a parking spot. It looks so massive next to this Ford Escape and the Maverick. Look how much bigger it is than this pickup truck. That's so funny. Okay, I don't actually need anything from Whole Foods, so let's jump back in the DB12. And we will finish out our short drive into downtown. We got a couple more things to talk about, and then we'll wrap on the roof of the structure. If you want to manually engage your parking cameras, you can do that with this physical button here on the right-hand side of your button panel. You can see it makes those cars look pretty silly. What's that Instagram, that like Helicoptus, I think? He makes the really silly looking animated cars. That's kind of what this looks like. But you do have a bit of a frontward tilted 360 camera, so that is nice. You can kind of see the road there in front of you. Let's put this thing into drive as we creep out of the parking spot. Great. Super quick steering. Very, very easy to get yourself out of tight spaces. The only thing I've had to learn this week with maneuverability is the throttle response, and I found it to be a bit touchy and a bit jumpy. Even when you're in GT mode, when you're in the softest settings, you really have to just breathe upon this accelerator pedal, or else the car is just very eager to go. It is kind of like an AMG Mercedes in that way. Well, as we get into town, we can kind of talk about what the ride is like in this DB12, and I'm happy to report that it is impressive. I think the biggest downfall here are these 21-inch wheels, and I mean, that's anything. You can't get around having large wheels and rubber band tires. I mean, it just kind of is what it is. In a performance setting, it's cool, it's awesome, it looks great, but when you actually need to take it somewhere, it makes you become a bit clenched, and it's almost a shame because the actual ride, the suspension tuning, the damping in this car is very soft. It's very impressive when you're in the softest, most relaxed setting. And it's all a bit kind of spoiled by these 21-inch wheels. But I don't think I'd change it because the outside of this car looks absolutely fantastic. And I think if you put some smaller wheels on it, it would look a bit silly with the rest of the proportions of the DB12. I think what Aston Martin did is they kind of leaned more into the super section of Super Tourer. It can tour still. The suspension tuning is impressive, but I think this is more of a supercar than it is a Grand Tourer. And that's not going to be as ideal for everyone. So just keep that in mind. Things that this car does well in comfort: the seat is supportive, the elbow comfiness is nice, the light steering is nice for maneuverability. Look at that pagoda. Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. So to sum it up, this DB12 isn't as much of a Grand Tourer as Aston Martins have been in the past, but it is still livable, it's still doable, and I think you would just be absolutely thrilled with this car, even though the brakes do make a lot of noise. Oh man, we're gonna have to go all the way to the roof today, and we may still have cars up there. That's okay. The ultimate maneuverability test. All right, let's not clout these $5,000 optional wheels on.
Please select an event from the screen menu. Welcome. Please proceed.
First try. Oh dear. What manner of things? It's okay. As we wind our way up the structure here, let's go ahead and wrap up and give some final thoughts on what it's been like to live with this Aston Martin DB12. You guys have all seen my enthusiasm. I like to say for me, it's been special to live with this car, but I think I want to expand that to this car is an experience for anybody. You know, even if you're somebody that's in the market to drop $300,000 on your next daily driver, this will still be a special experience for you. This car has some character. It has some soul. You do start to think of this DB12 as a person. And I think that that is kind of the most important thing for a car that enters the market as something special like this. You should be able to fall in love with it. This car doesn't feel like a laptop. It does still feel pretty connected. And for that, I've got to say that Aston Martin has done a good job. I think that they have very much delivered on their mission to produce a super tourer. This does feel quite a bit like a supercar, but you are still able to daily drive this in a way that's a bit more comfortable than the average thing like a Maserati MC20 or even a hot, you know, equivalently priced Porsche 911. You're still getting a bit more of that daily driver value here with this DB12. I do really miss the V12 in this car, and I think it's funny that the first DB car in a long time to not feature a V12 is called the DB12. It's a little bit of an oxymoron in that way to think, oh man, you finally made it to DB12 and it doesn't have a V12. But it is what it is, and I think, you know, with all of the super strict emissions regulations that you have in Europe, they kind of just have to work with what they have, and they've had this V8 tuned up to quite an impressive level. I have never in my life seen this structure as full as it is today, but we have this entire row of parking spots right here to ourselves. And we'll hit our start stop button, which does kind of imitate the old school, you know, taking your glass key and pushing it into the dashboard. We do still have a really nice key with this car. It has the glass look here at the front. Looks like it's been dropped a couple of times, but still, it was always cool to push that key into the old Aston Martins and have that feeling of starting the car up. Obviously, we've kind of moved beyond that, but it would be cool to kind of have some gimmicky Aston Martin things still in this DB12. They have moved into the future a bit, and, you know, it's just kind of the reality of the industry, of the market right now. But I think we still hold enough character and enough uniqueness in this DB12. And, I mean, come on, we got to take one last look at this thing and admire its beauty in iridescent emerald. Well, that'll wrap it up today. The channel just hit 60,000 subscribers, so I wanted to give you all a big thanks and tell you how much I appreciate your dedication to watching my videos. I never thought that I would make it to this point. I never thought that I would have the opportunity to daily drive and live with cars such as this, the DB12, the Lamborghini that I was driving a couple of weeks ago, and really just everything. It's something that is just, I never thought that it would be achievable. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Seriously, it's cliche to say that, but I do genuinely mean it. So thank you guys all so much for 60K. Thanks for watching. And let me know if you have any questions about what it's been like to live with this DB12. It has been an awesome week so far. And I'm actually going to go swap for a Porsche 718 Boxster here with the TheTopher later today. So expect a video on that coming soon, unless it went up before this. You'll already know about it, but okay. Are you tired of looking at the DB12 yet? I'm not. But that's going to, for real this time, wrap it up for us today. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.